Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Aggregate. My name is Joshua. It is Wednesday, the 13th of May, and today we'll be bringing the power of scientific forecasting to bear on the topical issue of hantavirus. But first, as always, let's meet the members of the podcast.
I am Jan. I'm ex-materie on Metaculus, and I've been a pro forecaster for a year and a half.
Hi, I'm Nicola. I am 404 not found on forecasting platforms, and I'm an industrial engineer and a super forecaster.
I'm Ben Schindel, material scientist, and I pro forecast with Metaculus and Rand.
Great. So first, a little bit of context about what's been going on with hantavirus. So there was a cruise ship that left Argentina way back in November of last year, and was going around sort of South America. And on this cruise ship were many different people, including a Dutch couple, who, while on the ship, took a bird watching tour, which took them past a rubbish dump, at which they may or may not have been exposed to certain rodents, and those rodents' emissions may or may not have contained hantavirus. And then this virus is what sort of caused the beginning of this outbreak. And once this couple had it and they were back on the cruise ship, it then seems to have spread relatively quickly. And there are now 12 confirmed cases around the world. That number, of course, may change at any sort of time, and more people have been quarantined to try and stop it. What's interesting about this is that hantavirus typically is only transmitted by rodent feces. And one of the concerns that's been going on around this sort of potential pandemic is the question of whether or not human-to-human transmission is occurring. Because there are variants of hantavirus where human-to-human transmission has been recorded, but there was sort of initial, there was initial lack of clarity of whether or not this outbreak was one of them. And there's been a lot of debate at sort of different points about what the level of transmissibility is, because unlike coronavirus, hantavirus has a very high level of a very high case fatality rate, and so it doesn't take that much transmission for the numbers to start racking up. But yeah, so the big question that people are talking about on Polymarket and sort of more broadly is this going to become an actual pandemic? Not necessarily on the scale of COVID. There are lots of smaller pandemics. There are pretty rigorous WHO guidelines about what a pandemic means, and it's a real sort of international state that can be declared. So I guess the question we want to try and get to the bottom of today is this going to be a pandemic? What are the chances? And what sources can we hope to consult to try and answer this question?
First question, you said it started last November? I thought the cruise only began April 1st.
So my understanding is that the cruise ship began in November, but then the cruise, of the ship, as it were. But then it didn't come to its conclusion till April. But it left port in April. Left port in November, and then in April the outbreak began.
Okay, my sources seem to think it's that this iteration of the cruise only began on April 1st, and then the first cases started pretty soon after that. It left port in Argentina. So I think it started right away. Like the cruise departed South America. It was going through various islands and then up the coast of Africa. And then like already a few days in, someone was sick. A few days later, they died. Their body was taken off at a small island, I think in St. Helena. And then the outbreak was like, at that point, people seemed to have known that there was something bad was happening, because a lot of people departed, flew to other destinations. That's how you get these people who are like, that have been to like 8 countries since leaving the cruise ship already, because before they like started actually locking people down, there are now people who are, there's like some American consultant who like, they don't even know her location currently. Like she was last in like Vietnam. She went to like a conference after. Yeah.
Also, sorry, I think I've realized the discrepancy between the dates is that you're right that the cruise left the 1st of April, but the Dutch couple took a road trip beginning in November. And I think it's on that road trip when they are meant to have been exposed, and then they get on the cruise the 1st of April. Then, as you say, very quickly things start going terribly wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, so they got exposed at any point in the last 7 months. This is
I
going to
think
help a lot.
incubation is like 1 to 8 weeks, so it's potentially very long, so like a couple of months. Yeah, no, not that long. So it could be up to a couple of
Okay.
months. But the fact is that this specific type of hantavirus, which is called Andes virus, is sort of endemic within a region, which is, I don't recall the name of the region, but there is a very specific area of Argentina, which is farther north, like in Patagonia. And there have been multiple outbreaks during the years. So there's a number of confirmed cases every year, and I think there is some kind of statistical number of deaths that happen every year, but there are very few outbreaks. So the two major outbreaks that both happened in that area, and the first one was in 1995, 6. So the first case was in 1995. Then there was a small outbreak, like 11 cases in 1996, which was the first confirmed transmission of the virus between humans. And later on, there was the largest one so far, which was 34 confirmed cases and 11 deaths. And that happened 40 kilometers away. That was in 2018 and was 40 kilometers away from the outbreak in 1996. So this means that there's a region of the world where there is some kind of reservoir for this virus. And it's plausible that, initially they said about this landfill in Ushuaia, where it's likely that the couple got the virus, but maybe it was not there. Maybe it was farther north, or maybe there was some people in Ushuaia they met who was in that area of Patagonia earlier. So I think this is a very interesting fact that this is not a novel virus. It's a virus that we know. We have not a lot of information, but especially because we have very few outbreaks. But it at least means that we have an idea of where this virus came from. And I think it's interesting the context of the cruise ship, because it has some benefit and some potential risks. And the benefit is that we know exactly who was on that ship, and it may be somewhat complex to track them down, but at least we have an idea of how many people were there and what their names are, where they lived. So contact tracing is possible. Of course, the issue is that this is not happening like in a small village in Patagonia. It's happening on a cruise ship with people from all over the world, which who have already traveled the world. As Ben said, some of them have been in multiple countries, and it has become pretty hard to track them down. So there's this aspect that we know who the prime suspects for contagion are, but also that it's very complex to track a few of them down to know if they're positive or not.
I already have a conspiracy theory with this.
Okay.
Can I say it? Okay, so we know that human-to-human spread is like very rare, but possible with the Andes virus, or at least the consensus is we think human-to-human spread is possible. But like, there's actually still arguments about the 2018 outbreak. There's people who say there actually wasn't really any human-to-human spread, and the like spreading events, like there was like a birthday party.
Yes.
There could have just been like rats there at the birthday party, and then a bunch of kids like touched food that was made with like rat droppings, fell in the food or something, right? And they all got sick. So there's like, it's not super clear which of the spread was human-to-human versus which was from animals. Now we have this new outbreak, and they're like, oh, the couple that got it, patient 0, they like went on this birding expedition, and they like must have encountered rat droppings. They were in this area that there is known to be this Andes virus in. But then we see all these cases on the cruise ship, and since then there hasn't been a single documented instance of human-to-human spread outside of it. So you see where this is going. Maybe there were rats on the ship.
Yes,
This is where they're
exactly.
from. And there's not any kind of like weird birder, origination theory. That's my conspiracy theory. I don't know if it's true, but it's like
I think one thing that gives like possible credence to this is that in comparison to the origins, well, not the origins, but the early coronavirus, when the cruise ship companies were falling over themselves to say it was safe, this time they seem to have really leaned into like, oh yeah, this is like a lethal new airborne virus, nothing to do with rat droppings, like it's obviously like transmissible between humans, which sort of seems to suggest like they did their sort of inventory of cleanliness and found that it was like apocalyptic and decided to bet on a pandemic instead.
I think that the theory is not so far-fetched, but that's mainly because I think cruise ships in general are like a very potential hotbed for viruses, and it's entirely plausible that rats have gotten into the ventilation system or something like that, and there was let's say the particles from their feces were just spread through to the ship in that way. So I think that's possible. The only thing I'm not sure about that is that I don't know if they're currently testing specifically for the Andes virus variant or for the hantaviruses in general, because it's a large family and it's possible that the test is just looking at hantaviruses in general. Also, I think that for what concerns the birthday party outbreak, I saw a research the past few days, which was the exact contact tracing of the people who got the virus from who, and there was an initial outbreak in the birthday party, but then there were like 3 individuals who infected multiple individuals, which was like 80% of the cases depended from 3 individuals alone, wherein most other individuals were not capable of transmitting the virus, or maybe they just transmitted it to another person. So we don't have enough data points to know what is the transmissibility of this virus, so what its RS0 is essentially. But it's possible that it's not highly transmissible, except for a few individuals who, for some reason or another, have a higher viral load and can become some kind of super spreaders. But again, that's part of the uncertainty that we have with these viruses, that we don't have any data points in the past to understand what the future will be from here.
Yeah.
I think the long incubation period adds to some of that uncertainty.
Yes.
But there's just like quite a long lead time at this relatively early stage to know what transmission has even occurred, even if it's sort of already happened in the past. But I guess sort of after another few weeks, that will start to become more obvious, hopefully.
And also, I think that the transmissibility can happen only very late in the stage. So I've seen different claims. Some claim that the virus is transmissible in the last few days before the first symptoms emerge. And some say that it's transmissible only after the symptoms have emerged, which is compatible with what we've seen. So maybe the first victim infected the wife, which was likely very close to him in the moments he was not feeling well. So that at least is a little bit of a bright side, because the incubation is very long, so contact tracing is complex, but the time in which the person can spread the virus is very limited, specifically because the course of the illness is incredibly fast. And as we have seen, let's say patient 0 had the first symptoms on, I think, April 6th, and he died on April 11th. And also the wife had a similar course, where I think it was very few days. And we've also seen that patients can deteriorate very fast. The Dutch woman, the wife of the first victim, was boarded on a plane, which was the main event of this outbreak, and she had to be removed from the plane just 5 minutes later, because it was clear that she could have not flown that flight safely. So it means that in the few hours from when she got to the airport to the moment she boarded the plane, her conditions deteriorated very quickly.
I think one also like sort of interesting element here is that in some ways I feel like COVID maybe sort of reset our understanding of what a pandemic is, because of course you had the Ebola pandemic that was also very, very serious and also had extremely high death rates, and transmissibility was relatively sort of like more difficult to achieve. And so it didn't really become a worldwide outbreak, but you were able to have this very intense regional outbreak, right, where portions of West Africa basically got shut down for a year because it was essentially sort of like too dangerous to travel. But it was also then quite self-limiting, and that while there were a few cases in the US, a few cases in Western Europe, they all sort of resolved themselves relatively quickly because of this like extremely high lethality. In the case of hantavirus, is the incubation period the risk factor here? In that once symptoms start to show, people go downhill very quickly, but before then they're just sort of able to travel freely.
Okay, so I think that it's not a rule, it's not a law of physics or anything, but there is a tendency for viruses to try to optimize for reproducibility. So it means that we tend to see viruses that either, let's say, if they spread too fast within the host, then virulence is very high and the individual dies off very fast. or they could go in the other direction and generate a very low viral load, which means that the individual is not able to transmit the virus. So typically, the type of viruses like hantavirus, which are highly lethal, tend to create outbreaks that die off naturally, and that's simply because individuals have a very limited amount of time to spread the virus somewhere else, meaning that the essentially the outbreak has nowhere to go. It cannot grow because it just incapacitates the host. There's also a human, let's say, a social aspect of this, which is that the higher the case fatality rate of a virus or an illness or whatever outbreak there is, the harsher the containment measures will be. So that's what we are witnessing here. And apart from the news outlets and media, which are going completely nuts about what could happen or what could not, but in general the response is being very strong. So I don't know if that's happening at the same level in all countries. I know that, for example, in Netherlands, they are currently quarantining plenty of medical personnel from the hospital in which the first group of patients were received, because there was some kind of mismanagement of samples from the patients, and so they decided to quarantine like 12 people. I know that here in Italy, there was some news today that was a woman from Argentina, and she was quarantined and she was being tested. And I was like, but I mean, I don't know about any Argentinian woman who came from that boat. And essentially they're tracking down every patient that came from Argentina, maybe tourists or people that recently traveled to Argentina, and they are currently in hospitals with pulmonary symptoms. So this woman has pneumonia, but they are still quarantining her and testing her for Andes virus. So countries are reacting very strongly, and that's a function of this virulence of this virus.
That made me think, Joshua, you were talking about Ebola. I was thinking about Zika too, which was kind of the same, which was really contained in, was it in Brazil?
Brazil.
Yeah, it was Brazil.
Yeah, it
I
was
remember
But
then
just
the
before the
concern, I think,
Olympics.
yeah, and the concern I think was like birth defects more than the
Yes.
actual, I guess, like sort of frontline symptoms, as it were.
Yes.
And so overall, what I take from this is that you guys think it's basically a nothing burger, and there's a lot of noise around this. We never know what might happen, but it seems like this isn't too much, and it makes me think, like, if we take a larger view on this, we've had two versions of monkeypox in the last 2 years. We've had a few scares around different versions of HN virus.
Mm-hmm.
There was something, I don't remember exactly what, in the US around cows, like last year, I think. Do you think that we were always this cautious and scared around this, or has COVID like made this 1,000 times worse than before? I don't really get a sense of that, because I remember one thing. So I'm from France, for those who don't know, and in around 2008 there was, I don't remember what it was. It was
It's the
the,
H1N1 flu
yeah,
pandemic.
most likely, yeah. Thanks, Joshua.
2009 was the swine flu, but that was 2009.
Okay, maybe 2009. I don't really remember exactly, but there was, uh, uh, um, it was the Secretary of Health in France which ordered almost 100 million vaccines, and everyone was just laughing at her for a decade until COVID came in. And it seems that since COVID, everyone is trying to go crazy anytime there is even the slightest idea of a new virus coming in. So yeah, what do you think about that, guys?
I think
Yeah.
definitely from like a policy perspective, there's like a very, and also like a political angle, that I think there's like a pretty clear timeline you can draw. Where like in the 90s and early 2000s, people start to get really worried about like globalization as it sort of relates to the potential pandemics, but nothing quite happens. And then you get SARS in 2003, that like has a bunch of different elements going on, right? It's really very, very lethal. You have this massive Chinese cover up. There's all sorts of like geopolitical implications, but it's not that bad. And like it's contained pretty quickly. It's ultimately like seen as like an East Asian problem. Then you have swine flu, which is seen not just like a nothing burger, but like the evil pharma companies make everyone buy loads of Tamiflu, which turns out not to work, and like nothing happens. And I think that makes a lot of people much more skeptical about sort of pandemics. And then you get COVID, which is like, actually, no, SARS really was the warning shot. Globalization does work that way. Like, you know, this sort of like, it is a live problem. And I think since then, everyone has just been absolutely primed for that. So I think it's really interesting you mentioned monkeypox, because like monkeypox turned out not to be as bad as people thought. But one of the really interesting things that happened was that during that sort of like 6-7 day period where it seemed like it could be like a big issue, a bunch of pharma markets start reacting as though it's the next COVID. So there's this one company, I think called Bavarian Nordic, who I believe either made like the only treatment for monkeypox, or they had like a vaccine, or essentially they were the only people who had sort of any like pharmaceutical product to offer for monkeypox. And even before, like even when monkeypox only had like 20 cases or whatever, their stock price goes up like 3-4 times because people just assume, like we're redoing COVID, and like retail investors pile in. And then obviously it turns out there were like pretty good methodological reasons why monkeypox was like nothing like COVID. But I think it's definitely true. There's just a different baseline expectation of what the early stage of the disease looks like. Like I think the notion of March 2020 has been a very powerful psychological factor in the way that people think about disease.
Yeah. For one, monkeypox was pretty bad. Like, not like on a global scale, but I think like part of the reason it wasn't worse was because people kind of took action. And I think we're seeing this like weird, there's like counter messaging going on where like you have the public is freaking out, and the media, some of the media is freaking out, and they're like, this is crazy, this like terrible virus, people are dying, with a giant cruise. And then you have like, you know, the people who are signaling the opposite way, who are like, okay, this is not going to be a pandemic, like everyone needs to relax. But I think like the correct response is to not to panic, but the correct response to take it very seriously, because like things could have gone very differently. Imagine that the public health agencies did not react at all. Then you would have had these people kind of, okay, one person died, they took him off the ship, another couple people die, that's weird. The cruise ends, everyone goes to their home countries. You might get, you know, let's say human to human spread is on the worst end of what we expect with this. You might plausibly get like thousands of cases before public health agencies are able to contain it. That would be really bad. And then you would have like global shutdowns. So, okay, maybe it turns out that the human to human spread is like more minor or very limited, and we nipped it in the bud and we stopped everyone from getting off the cruise ship without like being contained and whatnot. And maybe a couple people managed to escape, like these weird people who got off the cruise early and went to a bunch of countries, and then like they maybe spread it to another 1 or 2 people, but then it's contained. That's the good outcome. And so I think you need people to react in this kind of like, oh god, we got to do something about this way, or else you don't get containment in diseases like this.
So also
Yeah, I think that's
the scenario you are hypothesizing is interesting because, as I said, this virus is somewhat endemic within the rat population of certain regions of Argentina. So if there's an outbreak where people are falling sick and dying very quickly, they have at least, you know, in the back of their mind that it could be that virus. But if those passengers leave for, I don't know, Portugal, and you know, people start being sick all around Portugal with this very weird illness and nobody knows what's that. So it would take much longer to understand what the issue is and how to contain it. So that's another aspect.
There's a few like hearsay factors I've seen thrown around online. I'm not going to like die on these hills, but one person was saying it's possible that like people in these regions might have tolerance built up to this, or like you know, if it expands outside of South America, it could like spread more rapidly. I don't think that's true, but I'm not a virologist, so maybe it's possible. A second thing I saw thrown around was people who are getting the hantavirus in like by going around and digging in mouse droppings in rural Argentina tend not to be the kind of people who go and like travel to other parts of the world very frequently. In this cruise ship, that
Yes.
obviously is not the case. So that's like a unique risk. And then another thing I saw was that people said, okay, great, the case fatality rate's like 30 to 60%. Well, what about the other people who survive? And they said the prognosis could be really bad. Like actually, most people who survive, they die in a few years anyway. Again, I tried to validate that, and I couldn't really find good research on like long-term effects of Andes virus after a few years. So it's possible that was like BS, but just some things to make people think about this.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think that the hypothesis that because there is even some talking like, yes, the virus right now is not spreading that fast, but it could mutate. Yes, of course, viruses can mutate, but ultimately mutation is a function of a probability density function. So essentially you have how many viruses going around at a certain time and how much time is the virus staying alive, because viruses are not alive but it's staying within the host. The more viral load is available globally and the longer it is active for, the more likely it is that we are going to see some kind of mutation that can survive it, that can have some negative properties. So, like in this case, negative properties probably that it would spread faster, or that it would, maybe start spreading earlier during the incubation period. But at present, we just have 9 people, and those 9 people have a very limited time in which the viral load is very high before dying off. So the probability that we're going to see a mutation right now doesn't seem really high, but it's also plausible that the Andes virus they have is some kind of mutation that comes from Argentina, that it has evolved in mice populations, in rats populations, and it's somewhat different. But I think it's very too early to say, and the evidence so far is that there have not been that many transmissions. So even compared to the event in 2018, when there were those 34 cases in a single community. Uh, that was a small community. It was not people that were traveling around the world. They were not living far apart from each other. But people in the cruise were essentially sharing the same close quarters for days before the quarantine began. And also, again, the ventilation system, all the infrastructure of the ship makes the spread of viruses incredibly uh, faster, let's say, more. So for the moment, I think it's reasonable to be optimistic about the fact that it will be. Maybe it will not be contained immediately, but it's likely that it will die off spontaneously, just because it's not spreading fast enough to survive on its own.
Hmm. Just to go back on what Ben said, I think it's actually a very good point. Well, you were talking about monkeypox, uh, the fact that when things don't go extremely badly, we forget that it's often because we've done stuff for that. Uh, the best example I have in mind for that is the ozone layer, which now almost seems like a hoax, but it was actually a very real thing, and it's because we did a ton of thing around it that it it didn't go that badly. So yeah, I think that was a very good thing to bring up.
Also, the Millennium Bug in 2000, nothing
Yeah.
happened. It
Mm.
was a nothing burger, but
Yep.
that's because a lot of people worked really hard to avoid any kind of issue
Yeah.
to the IT systems in
Yeah.
the world. And but that's the interesting thing, because the declaration that there is a pandemic is not only a scientific thing. It's also
Mm.
highly
Yeah.
politically charged. And that's interesting, because there's always this risk that it seems like you're crying wolf, crying wolf, crying wolf, and nothing happens. And we have seen this in the past for happen many times. And I think that one main issue, specifically with viruses and pandemics, is that the perception of risk that lay people have about viruses is completely different from what is perceived as a risk from scientists and researchers and virologists and experts. So, for example, a person sees on television that 30%, 50% of patients with hantavirus will die in a few days of this terrible illness, which essentially melts their bodies from the inside, and everyone is terrified. Makes sense to be terrified, but in a global perspective, that's going to be likely a very limited number of deaths. While if you look at something like a variant of the seasonal flu or swine flu in 2009, you're going to have millions, potentially even billions of people that contract the virus. And maybe just like 0.01% die, and that 0.01% is just elderly people who maybe had diabetes or maybe had some other comorbidity, and people just doesn't notice that because it seems like, yeah, but they were weak, they were old, so they would have died anyway, and it's not perceived as the same level of risk. But if one thinks about COVID and how much it overloaded our hospital systems around the world, the problem becomes immediately more clear. And that's a huge issue that people just doesn't think in terms of what's the relative risk, but they just think about the local risk.
So if I hear what you're saying correctly, what we should do then is we should have scientists try to make the diseases we have like more intense and more deadly through some sort of maybe gain of function research
Well,
to limit the
this is a
spread.
classic plot of 2000 films, right? Where like the pandemics always start because like the evil researchers and like the Resident Evil sort of complex create the fake virus that becomes real and everyone dies.
Yeah.
Okay,
And that's never happened for sure.
But goes without saying.
I have an extremely good transition. Joshua, do you think that Keir Starmer is going to have a virus or be removed from Prime Minister first?
Ooh, well, I haven't checked the news in the last 30 minutes, so it's possible he has in fact already been removed. I'm going to look very silly. I think it's more likely he gets the flu first. I think that he's sort of in the last 48 hours, right? I think it's sort of he's shown his mettle. I think it's also interesting, right? So just to like clarify what the current situation is, extremely briefly in British politics, Keir Starmer's undergoing this sort of leadership crisis. We've spoken about it sort of on earlier episodes, but it's become very, very acute. And there was a real sense that he might be replaced by a Labour MP called Wes Streeting, who I guess like represents sort of the soft left Labour Party, although is also very much an individual character who like is famously extremely ambitious. There was a general atmosphere. There was a sense that the Keir Starmer was going to have to resign. He basically just said, no, I won't. And because, as we spoke about in this previous episode, the Labour Party doesn't really have a clean way to force out a prime minister they want to get rid of. They have no equivalent to the Conservative Party's 1922 committee. This like attempted coup has basically failed. There's now this sort of weird interregnum where Starmer is like in a very difficult position, but certainly seems to basically be saying like, no, I won't go. And Wes Streeting is also very unpopular among Labour MPs, and so doesn't really have the support for him. And once again, we come to this issue of if Starmer goes, somebody has to replace him. It seems like basically nobody can at the moment. And so he's certainly seen off the acute challenge. Whether or not he'll get to the next general election, I think is much less clear. I suspect that he won't. But I'm going to go on a limb and say that I think he's still going to be in office come Friday afternoon. That's my bold prediction. I'm putting an 80% chance that he is still number 10 Friday 5 p.m. That's where the marker is. But coming back to hantavirus very briefly, scores on the doors. What are our percentage chances of the WHO declaring a pandemic in 2026?
Do
A
you mean
hantavirus pandemic, that
specifically
is.
on-
Yeah, no, indeed, very, very good on a hantavirus pandemic specifically.
So it's funny because we were actually talking about that with Ben before starting, and basically we're in agreement around something like 4-5%. He had a larger interval, but yeah, I'm at 5% because, like Nicholas said, the decision is not only about the gravity of the actual illness, and we've had. So I looked at the base rate like yesterday, I think, and it's been closer and closer. I think in part because now it is not only related to like China, Africa, and South America, and the fact that it's in North America and Europe makes the WHO act faster. But still, with everything that the guys have said, I don't think that's likely to happen.
To clarify, I think we were talking about the PHEIC designation, which is slightly lower or a decently lower bar than a pandemic.
My bad.
I think, yeah. For a pandemic, I would put it at 1%.
Yeah,
I hesitate to
1%
go.
or less.
Just like instinctually, I don't want to go lower than 1%, but it might be lower.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you're right. My bad.
Yeah. But prediction markets have it much higher. So Polymarket has it around 8 to 9% right now. Kalshi has it. Kalshi doesn't have a market on a specific hantavirus pandemic, I believe, but they have a market on whether there will be any pandemic, and that's a little higher. And then the market on whether it would be a PHEIC on Kalshi is trading at about 19%, which is quite high. I think it's possible the WHO does that sort of, in response to public interest or fear, like, hey, we're taking this seriously. It's emerging end of international concern. But I don't think in a vacuum it's very likely that they would have done that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I think the messaging around it is clearly a very large part of it. They want to show they've got their arms around this thing, not kind of like sleeping on the job, even if they don't actually think it's very likely to become a formal pandemic.
Yeah.
Well, I guess time to put our skills to the test and see if we can do some 24-hour predicting. Ben, what do we have waiting for us in this week's Predictal?
In this week's Predictal, we have 2 Bitcoin questions.
Our favorite.
So we have
Should be
Bitcoin
easy to
84K.
order them.
Yeah, Bitcoin 84K in May, and Bitcoin 90K in May. So we have 2 of those. If I recall correctly, I actually think I did look at Bitcoin prices within the last 24 hours. And I think they're like 79 or 80K right now. So we have a good. I didn't look it up. Then we have, will Donald Trump be impeached and removed during his second term? That's this term. Then we have, will Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi still be alive by June 1st, 2026? So that's like 3 weeks or less. And then finally, topically, we have, will a vaccine against the Andes virus be tested in humans? It says Andes virus in parentheses hantavirus, so I'm assuming a general hantavirus vaccine would count. Be tested in humans before the end of next year, 2027. All right, let's go.
Okay, so basically we already have 2 questions on which we know the order with Bitcoin.
Yes.
84K
Okay.
higher than 90K.
Yeah, and I would say I think 90K would be very low. I sort of I think like a 15% rise at this point, this stage of the market seems. Yeah, I would price something in less than 10%. Well, no, that's not it's Bitcoin. Less than 15%, I would say on that.
Okay, maybe around 15. It's manifold, so people might just be throwing money.
True. Yeah, we've got to think about what they're thinking. The one that I find interesting is the Iranian foreign minister one. My initial response would be extremely low. But then I guess like there's always the chance of further escalation. And it doesn't seem crazy that if there is, the US response will be a sudden second leadership strike. Foreign minister's probably not going to be in the deepest bunker. Doesn't seem crazy.
Yeah, or high. This is the market's asking about whether he'll be alive. So maybe let's say like 90-something%. I don't know. Unless he's like currently like battling some sort of wounds from the earlier strike, which I don't think I recall happening.
But it's possible that it's that. Yeah. It's also possible that it's maybe elderly. I don't know, because there's plenty of old people in the Iranian, but maybe ministers are not that old.
He's not that old. So Abbas actually is 63 years old. Okay. And I'm not looking anything up. It just so happens that today I looked that guy up.
Okay. I was somewhat worried that you knew so much about the guy. I was like,
it's like 2.5 weeks to the resolution date, right? So like it seemed like the base rate for a 60-something dying, I'm guessing is low.
That's not extremely high, but there's a decent likelihood that things ramp up again in Iran. And this guy is always front and center in the news. If you saw his face, you would recognize him right away, because he's the one we see. Like, basically, there are 3 guys. There's him, there's the military chief, and another one I can't remember right now. But basically, they do 90% of what we saw abroad. Abroad from the point of view of Iran. So I wouldn't go too high, although it's unlikely to happen. I agree. It's not. Sorry, the reverse. It will be alive. It's very likely. I don't know if I would go up to 90%.
Has Iran targeted ministers? Because I think they mostly targeted like Sorry,
so
as Israel
When the
targeted.
ministers at the
Yeah,
beginning?
yeah, so
yeah.
like the intelligence minister, certainly. I think there were some
But
other ones as
was
well.
very specific to the military, probably, because I think it was.
Maybe.
I'm not sure about that, but I think they usually go for the military leadership and the main leadership. So I don't know about ministers. Maybe it's not one of the main target.
That's true.
I
I
feel that
think
like
maybe
the
the
foreign
time
minister
where
is a
sorry, Josh. The time when they might have killed ministers was when they killed Khamenei, and at that point, it was actually not to kill ministers; it was to kill Khamenei, so it shouldn't count. So yeah, maybe you're right. The base rate is low on that. Yeah, maybe.
Because I think they're typically very surgical with their strikes, which is one of the reasons that when there were the earlier war in Gaza and in Lebanon, it became immediately evident they were like targeting specific individuals with very targeted attacks. So if he's still alive now, maybe he will be alive even in a second round of strikes. I don't know if his leadership position within the government has changed significantly, but that's also a possibility.
I'm going to go on a limb, and I think that's the highest one. I think surely that's got to
Yeah.
be the highest, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
So then we have the will Donald Trump be impeached? Will Donald Trump be impeached and removed during his second term?
Surely the and remove bit makes it no, in the sense that
Yeah.
like the Senate is never going to convict.
Yes.
And then so I mean, I think maybe that's around 10%, if I had to guess what this market would be at. The question is this lower than Bitcoin 90K?
Ooh, no, I think it is. I think it is lower than Bitcoin 90K because I think they're like Bitcoin's very volatile. There are plausible paths to it having a 12% increase. I don't think that the same exists for the Donald Trump removal.
Okay. I think this market, the impeachment market, could be as high as because Dems could take the House and Senate. They could impeach him. The removal's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But if something bad happens in the midterms, then maybe senators are like, okay. But yeah, I think it's probably like, I would guess the market's trading at 10%, but I would price this personally at like 6 or 7%.
There's also the percentage of manifold users who won't have read the words and removed and will be treating it as an impeached market.
I think that's
and think about that as well.
Yeah, well, the whales just take their money.
What do you, Ben? What do you mean by things go bad and senators decide like?
I mean, the economy there could be an economic crisis and there could be a big scandal, and then all of a sudden you have Republican senators who would support a removal if it's on the docket. You could have Trump could have a serious health crisis, and then refuse to step aside. There's possibilities. I mean, I actually think an impeachment and removal might be the most likely way that Trump leaves office at this point. Before 2028, that is.
Yes, because he can't get assassinated.
Yeah, and as we saw with Biden, right? Yeah, I think it's unlikely, but maybe. As we saw with Biden, you can have a large what's the term for that? Where everyone changes their opinion at once. Cascade. Wait, what?
Now I was thinking about cognitive decline because
Biden, you could have that too. Yeah. You have cognitive decline, and then you could have a preference cascade.
I'm not implying that it's already happening. I'm not implying that, but it could happen.
Could happen. But he's very good at remembering doing those tests. They show him like a monkey and then a bird,
yes.
and then
have you done those tests?
The order of them. Yeah,
these are impressive.
Okay, so that leaves us with the vaccine against the Andes virus. Will it be tested in humans for the end of next year?
So I looked that one up and researching for tonight. I think it was higher than I expected because it was like 40% or something like that.
Wow!
But I think that I didn't read the resolution. Right? I didn't read the resolution criteria, so I think it's plausible that they're that it's being tested on only one individual because there could be a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials. So phase 1 clinical trial would be a very low bar. Also, I'm quite sure that we already know how to make the vaccine. But simply there is no economic incentive to do that because there is no cases enough cases during the year to make it economically viable. So essentially, if the contagion, if the outbreak were to continue, then it's possible that some pharma company will try to test it, but I think that the reason the probability for this is a little bit higher than we would have thought is just because probably the resolution criteria is about phase 1 clinical trials, so it's a very low bar.
I also think this is like a bit of a post-COVID thing though as well, where I think that there's just like way more pressure on like the FDAs of this world to try and set up like the fastest possible pipeline for getting vaccines at the very least tested for viruses which are seen as like potential pandemics. And I think that also happened a little bit with in the monkeypox case as well. But I think certainly with this, there's going to be a lot of like government support to have something, even if this round doesn't become the pandemic. I think there's a sense that hantavirus is now been added to the list of global threats. And so I think 18 months, I agree in 2019 that would have seemed crazy. I don't think that seems insane that it will be in human trials by December next year.
Yeah. I remember seeing a stat where it was like it only cost a few $1 billion to get vaccines against every major viral class that could infect humans. And they wouldn't be like as great as individually tailored vaccines, but they would work in a pinch. And this number was like, I think, shown to agencies, and they were like, all right, thanks. But yeah, you could just make mRNA vaccines for every single. You could make a hantavirus mRNA vaccine. You could make it, other broad vaccine
I think
classes.
that with COVID, when they had the full sequencing of COVID, it took them like 24 hours to have a series of possible vaccines already. They already had, let's say, the formula, the sequence for the vaccine, and like 99% of the work there is just go through the regulatory process and scale up production and logistics and everything, because that's the most complicated part. But finding the sequence for a vaccine with mRNA, it's probably not that complex. I don't know if that's the case. Of course, it depends from the type of virus, but it's something that I wouldn't have expected. But the process can be very fast if needed.
Yeah, you could probably just do it on, your Claude could probably just churn it out right now.
You should take off the guardrails.
Yeah. It wouldn't even answer my questions about hantavirus. It was like we've
detected you're up to no good, right? It detected
right. Yeah, you're asking about
Mm-hmm.
biowarfare stuff.
Trying out your conspiracy theories.
Yeah, what do you think about this conspiracy theory about hantavirus? The only thing we need to determine is, do we think that the Andes virus will be tested in humans more likely or less likely than Bitcoin 84K in May?
I think marginally lower.
You think a little lower?
I think that's lower. Yeah.
I think it's higher, but just a little bit.
Really? Okay, so what would be the current ranking?
Well, Abbas Araghchi is like at 90-something% probably. Donald Trump impeachment is probably around 10%. We think 90K Bitcoin is just above 10%, so above that. Then we have the Andes virus, which we're pretty sure is around 40%. Then we have Bitcoin 84K in May. Bitcoin's currently 80K. There's only 2.5 weeks, but there's like day-to-day variability on the order of like 2% or whatever, right? So like 2 days up and it's past it. I think the Bitcoin 84K should be higher, but only by a bit, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think this is a pretty reasonable ordering.
Higher than what? So just the highest probability is Abbas Araghchi, then 84K.
Yeah.
The vaccine, 90K, and Trump.
Yeah.
And so, which one is it from Bitcoin that you think is higher?
84K.
Yes.
Do you think it's higher than Araghchi?
No, just higher than vaccine. I think, but
okay. My bad. Yeah.
But I mean, it's close. I just know that the one about testing is like 40% or something, and Bitcoin going up or down 4K is like nothing. So
that could be like 60% for all I know. Yeah,
it's very close.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and submit. Let's see what we did.
60 sounds right. 60 sounds right.
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
I guess Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, something has happened to him, because we didn't get the top one correct, and so there's two switched. So I'll fix them. Actually, Andes virus was higher than Bitcoin, and it was the highest somehow. So that was at 82%. That seems very wrong to me. I think maybe, yeah, it looks like it's been corrected since then. The market's down to 34% now, but as of the start of the day, it was 82%. So everyone else saw this predictal and was like, hell no. Aragchi had the opposite, was 60% at the beginning of the day, and now is at 77%.
Okay. But that makes sense to me. Like,
That
there's
does
a
seem like a
real
sane
possibility
updating.
that yeah, there's really a
So,
possibility that something happens to him by the end of the month. Yeah, that doesn't. No. That's fine. You convinced me, guys, and that was reasonable. I'm actually very surprised by the vaccine. How low did you say that it dropped? 35.
So I'm looking
Yeah.
at the chart right now, and it's very funny because at the beginning of the day it spiked to like 90% for a couple of hours, and then went all the way down to 30%. So today I probably looked at it halfway through the day, it was 40, but there's this interesting spike, which is insane. It was 38% yesterday, went up to 89% for 4 hours, and then went back to where it is right now. So I don't know what happened. Probably just very volatile market.
Okay, so if we were looking at the right percentage, we would have gotten it right.
If we're looking at the percentages that they're at now, then yeah,
Yeah.
we would have gotten it correct, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I would
That's
give us
pro
an 8 out
forecasting
of
for
10
you.
for like raw forecasting, and 2 out of 10 for understanding crowds. I think we failed the Keynesian beauty contest, but we got the numbers right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, at least that's that.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, guys. I hope you're all feeling a little bit better about the Hantavirus now. Now we know that nothing bad's going to happen. We're going to have vaccines by next December. I think we can all basically relax and say job done. So have a good week, and we will see you all next time.
See you guys.
See you. Bye bye.
Ciao.